You're listening to Your Calm Parenting Path. I'm your host Nina, a mindful parenting coach and mum, here to help you go from overwhelmed and reactive to calm, confident and connected with your kids. This show is for parents who want to raise their children with more patience, less stress and a whole lot more joy. Because small shifts make a big impact and you can build the parenting life you've always wanted. If you want to see what I'm up to, follow me on Instagram at Mindful Parenting Lifestyle, and don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Let's get started. Hello everybody, welcome to Your Calm Parenting Path. Today I'm joined by Susan Hughes. She's an accredited ADHD parent coach with both professional expertise and personal lived experience. Susan is a mum to a now adult with ADHD, and it was her own parenting journey that inspired her to dive deeper into this work. She completed a Master of Education in 2017 and now supports families through one-on-one coaching and her group program, the Confident ADHD Parent Formula. Susan also works with teachers and schools, helping create more inclusive classrooms and reducing the stress that often comes with supporting neurodivergent students. She's here today to talk with us about one of the most powerful and often overlooked parts of ADHD parenting, our own emotional regulation and self-awareness as parents. Susan, I am so glad that you're here.
Hi, Nina. How are you? I'm delighted to be part of your show.
Yay, I'm so chuffed to have you here. I forgot to put in my intro that you're just one awesome lady as well.
Thanks so much.
So, Susan, could you start by telling us a little bit about your background? How did you come to support parents of children with ADHD?
Yeah, well, I have a really interesting background in that I used to be an accountant and now here I am. And really, it came from my own journey of finding parenting so challenging. I was a late parent and we moved to Australia with a 2 and a 4-year-old. And it was the first time I was a full-time parent at home. My husband had done the main work in Ireland. I worked and he stayed home. And so it was the first time I had to really be a hands-on parent. And goodness gracious, was it tough. I was actually astonished how challenging it was because, you know, they were 2 and 4, 2 little boys, full on, particularly the second one. And it was kind of at the end of the day, I go, well, where's my checklist of what I've achieved for the day? Oh, yes, they're both alive. Great.
Tick.
And like, that's all you're getting when they're that age. You know, it's like it's keeping them alive and hopefully not having too many rows. But my youngest was very, very independent. Spirited was the term he was called, which I thought was very fun. He was a little tiring to live with. And he was just incredibly opinionated and incredibly, you know, one of his first sentences was, me do it. Like, that was just how he ticked. And so he challenged me so much as a parent because he wasn't biddable. He wouldn't do what I wanted. He wouldn't do what I wanted him to do. He wouldn't do what I told him to do. He wouldn't do what I asked him to do a lot of the time. And so, of course, it triggered me terribly. Now, I'd already qualified as a coach, so I knew some coaching skills. But it wasn't until I met another coach here in Australia who was a parent coach that I kind of started to recognize I can use those skills at home. And really, those skills were about myself, about learning to actually regulate my own self and recognize so much of coaching is about awareness. It's actually about self-awareness. What's coming up for you? What's going on for you? And goodness gracious, you know, parenting little children at home, there's nothing like that to trigger you.
I agree wholeheartedly.
So basically, I had a really tough time for the first few months. And my turning point was one morning I was trying to get my eldest to school. He has ADHD. I knew nothing about ADHD at the time. And I was just thinking it was really hard to get him out the door on time. So I was struggling to get him out the door, already running late. And my youngest just would not cooperate and get in the buggy. So I slapped him in temper. And it was purely me. Like I was utterly frustrated. And he turned around and gave me such a look of hatred. But I'm so glad I saw that because that was my moment to go, okay, I need to find another way of parenting.
Wow.
And it was from that moment on that I realized it was actually on me. It wasn't about him at all. I had to learn how to be emotionally regulated.
Yeah.
And it's really challenging if you haven't been taught it as a child. And I certainly wasn't.
Wow. I can't imagine how that felt to see that look when he turned around. Heartbreaking.
And honestly, Nina, when I look back at that moment and go, if I hadn't seen it there and then, honestly, he'd be drinking and drugging probably, as opposed to like he's an amazing child who knows exactly what he wants in life, because we were able to guide him rather than we were able to guide that really strong personality. So he can be himself, but still listen to us. And that is so challenging.
100%. So when did you discover that your child had ADHD?
From word go, he found school challenging. He was called dreamy and distant and fairy-like and everything else. And I was going, okay, yeah, all right. First child, I knew nothing to compare him to. Did pick up in year 1 that he was really struggling with reading. And so, again, sometimes you meet the right people, and the teacher he had guided me to go and get tuition for him. So basically, he went to tuition, he learned to read. So during year 2 and halfway through year 3, he went 6 terms of reading, one-on-one reading instruction, and he learned to read. So we knew he had dyslexia, but I thought, right, hopefully he'll be fine then. But he still was struggling with school. And it was through another coach conversations with her that I recognized actually ADHD might be the issue there. So he was diagnosed formally. I'm saying formally by inverted commas because it's still at that age, he's probably at risk of it.
Yeah.
And I remember going into his teacher in year 4 going, okay, he's got ADHD, he's got dyslexia. How are we going to support him? And she looked at me and said, I don't know. And I walked away and went, right, well, I'll just go back to university and find out.
Amazing.
So that was my driver to go and do my Master's of Education. I was so frustrated. And I had been doing some little bit of research and reading, whatever, and there was so little knowledge out there. So I was really lucky, again, meeting the right person at the right time. The head of education guided me she said, enroll in the Master's of Education and basically work hard for the first semester, get high distinction, we can then transfer to Master's by Research. So that's what I did. My Master's by Research was looking at the benefit of coaching parents with ADHD. So it meant I got a really in-depth knowledge of parenting, of coaching, and of ADHD. And that's why it was so valuable.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. What are some common misconceptions that people have about ADHD and what it might mean for parenting, the effect that it has on parenting?
I think the biggest challenge for modern parents is to recognize the child is not doing it deliberately. That it's actually it is the way their brain works. And one of the biggest impacts of ADHD on an ADHD brain is it often nearly always have weak executive functioning. Now, that becomes more evident as the child gets past the age of maybe 8, 9, 10, so upper primary school and into high school, because the gap gets bigger because neurodeveloping children, their executive functioning is developing faster.
Okay.
So it means things like planning and organizing and prioritizing and sticking at something and starting something you don't want to do. That's actually all executive functioning. The self-motivation, intrinsic motivation, which is the holy grail for children. But you can't teach that to a child unless they have the executive functioning developed enough. And that's where people go wrong. And then, unfortunately, if you go down the route of discipline or punishment in terms of a child not being able to do what they can do, that's where you create a lot of damage in self-esteem. And that's where the trajectory of research is really quite negative to unsupported children. That's why it's so incredibly important to, as a parent, to understand as soon as you can what to do and how to support your child.
Yeah. So when parenting a child with ADHD, why is the parent's emotional regulation so important in that respect?
So most people are probably familiar with the concept of fight, flight, or flee. So I often joke in our family, we have all 4. Myself and my youngest son are fighters, which is why we used to rip-roaring rows till I learned to regulate myself.
Yeah.
My oldest son is a freezer, and I didn't see it for years. And then eventually, when I really got to understand him, I realized that the more pressure I put on, the more he retreat into a shell like the proverbial tortoise. He would just, but that is incredibly dangerous in terms of not recognizing it, because what you're doing is suppressing the child's emotions and they have no way of expressing them. And the flea then is my husband. My husband doesn't do confrontation. He runs away.
Yes.
But the reason I'm bringing this up is because you actually need to understand what your own reactions are. We're born with that, and your amygdala gets triggered. So if you're a fight, flight, or free person, they're the most important things. And it's really important to understand all your family members, because if you're a fighter and your child's a fighter, they get triggered because you ask them to do something they're not capable of doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get angry because they're not doing what they want to do. And the whole thing goes to
Oh,
major meltdown very, very quickly.
can very much relate to that. Yes.
So that's why the emotion regulation for ourselves is so important, particularly if you're a fighter. But even if you're a freezer or you're a fleer, all of those three reactions, if you don't understand why you're reacting the way you are, i.e. you don't understand your own emotional reactions to things, then it's actually very difficult to be able to support your child in the moment because you get caught up in your own emotions.
Yes. So knowing that your response to those particular situations, why is it extra challenging if you've got a neurodivergent child?
This is a personal opinion, but I think it's because they push us further in the sense that a typical ADHD child looks like they're not listening, looks like they're being disobedient, looks like they're not trying, looks like they just won't do their chores, looks like they won't pick their child off the floor for choice.
Yeah.
All of it is actually executive functioning.
But
unless you understand that, you can't make allowances for them. And you just think, no respect, not listening, never do what I want. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
And of course, that triggers you as a parent.
So it's having that extra awareness that it's not your child's fault. They're not doing it to annoy you. They just don't know quite yet how to do it effectively.
They just can't. They haven't got the executive functioning yet.
Yeah.
And I always emphasize that with the parents I work with. The word is yet.
Yet.
They will get there. They're just not there yet.
Yes.
And it's so important to hold on to that word. When I remember the gap most happening in year 5 or 6, where it was like, you'd be in the school playground and all the other parents be talking about, oh, my child's great. He gets up and he packs his bag and he goes, and I'm going, oh my God, my child does well to dress himself. And it's the recognition that you won't be doing that when they're in year 9 or 10. You probably even won't be doing it in year 7 or 8. It's just meeting the child where they are and actually giving them support they need in the moment so that they don't damage their own self-esteem, so they don't feel bad because they can't do it. It's matching our expectations to their ability.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if your child is having a meltdown and is always totally dysregulated, what's the first thing that you suggest parents should do with themselves before they respond?
I actually always advocate, if you can, take 3 deep breaths. For some people, that does work. But if you're not used to doing it, it may be very little impactful initially. Although the more you practice it, the more effective it becomes, without a doubt.
Definitely.
The most effective thing is assuming your child is at the age where it's safe to leave them. Walking away and giving yourself space is incredibly, really useful. And what parents often struggle with is the children follow them. So then you need to actually have that conversation in the home about big emotions, and normalize that sometimes we get big emotions, even as parents, and we can't always manage them. They're just too much in the moment. So I need space. So finding a way of actually giving yourself space so that you can regulate before you can even start to address your child. Because as I know from personal experience, when you're dysregulated, you just escalate it and the whole thing goes to meltdown very, very quickly.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly.
Isn't it? It's mindful parenting in the sense of recognizing what's going on for you, why you're feeling the way you are, and that 3 deep breaths, take them. Do you feel any better? Yes, I'm better enough to actually be able to handle it, or no, I'm not. Well, then you walk away.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And that's what we teach in the mindful parenting, is taking that time to react kindly and calmly instead of reacting with your fight, flight or freeze response. Yeah.
I like the definition of mindful parenting. I teach mindful parenting as part of my program as well. And basically it's noticing the emotion without judgment. And I think that's a really good way of putting it, because ultimately it's about noticing, oh, your child is dysregulated, but you know what? I am as well.
Yes.
And that's okay. That's a normal. But it's really important to talk about this within the family. It is normal to have big emotions. Talk about who's flight, fight or flee. You're a fighter. That's the way you react, the way you do. I am as well. So when we're both dysregulated, we need to walk away and give each other space.
Yeah. You know, Susan, I never thought about actually looking into my response. I say fight, flight or freeze, same thing. And also talking to them about it and asking, you know, what do you think your response is? Because I can already picture my middle child, exactly what he is based on how he reacts. And it's a really great way to look at it and even to talk about it afterwards. What do you think you did that time?
There's a wonderful resource by Dr. Dan Siegel called Flip the Lid video. And I recommend every single family watches it. And from the age of 8 or 9,
Yes.
watch it with your child. So they understand that big emotions are completely and utterly normal.
Yes.
But what we need to learn is how to manage them. And when you layer in ADHD over that, the difficulty is you've got a child who doesn't have the skills yet compared to the norm in inverted commas. That's why it becomes so difficult. And the problem is the fight response is the one that gets them into trouble socially. It's the one that gets them into trouble in school. So if they're dysregulated due to being asked to do too much or sensory issues or whatever that's going on for the child, and they're pushed too far and they blow up and they punch somebody or they throw a table over or they do something awful, they get punished for that within the school system. Whereas in actual fact, in the moment, the child had actually no other skills.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so difficult.
That's where it's a challenge.
And that's why talking about this as soon as we can, normalizing emotions is so incredibly important. But the difficulty is as a parent. I mean, I grew up with zero emotion regulation being taught to me. I actually was in my 30s before I even recognized emotions were physiological. Nobody had told me that before.
Wow.
You feel the emotion in your body. Oh, duh, I didn't know that.
It's like, boom, light blown.
Yeah, it really was a boom moment. So it's like, talking about that to our children as well. Like, and when they're young, they won't get it. But the more we talk about it, the more they will eventually understand that you actually feel it physiologically, and trying to identify where you feel it. Somewhere along the center of your body, between your head and your tummy, typically shoulders, neck.
Yeah.
That's typically where we feel it. If you can recognize that, then that's your warning sign. Walk away before it gets any worse.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Susan. I really do. So moving away from the child, let's get more talking about the parenting. How do you support parents who are feeling overwhelmed or emotionally exhausted from the daily demands of raising a child with ADHD?
I guess there's two places to start. And the easiest place is actually as a parent stopping and looking at what your expectations are. So one of the things I often catch is parents. It's a bad example because some people are very attached to it. But for example, insisting that a child makes their bed every morning. To what end are we trying to achieve that? So that's as a parent. I'm not telling you what's right or wrong, but as a parent, you need to question: is that an expectation that is fair in the moment? Having to have a shower every night, is that an expectation that is fair in the moment, both for you and your child? First thing in the morning, last thing at night tend to be the most tricky times in a day, particularly for a child with ADHD, because they're overwhelmed at the end of the day. So I call it survival mode. If your child comes home from school, and often we come to the end, last week of term, they're all completely and utterly over it at this stage.
Yeah.
So overwhelmed, so emotionally dysregulated often when you get them home. And it's been so hot this term, it's been horrible. So basically, it's like you look at the child, okay, the most important thing for me tonight is get him fed and get him into bed at a time so he gets sufficient sleep.
Yes.
So some chance he could actually take part in the following day. So in that moment, you take off all expectations.
Love that.
They're the only two things you do. I have been known to give my child dinner in the bath in the last week of term. Into the bath, here's your dinner. Because it's the way to get it done. Just get it done.
Towards the end of term, we have Weet-Bix for dinner. If that's what they need, nothing too hard, nothing too full on for meal times. Just sit at the table, make your cereal or whatever, and just relax, take it easy. I think it's so important.
So that mindfulness as a parent is about recognizing actually some of these expectations are being set by me. Can I let them go? Be mindful of what you're asking them to do.
Brilliant. What kinds of self-talk or guilt do you often hear from parents of ADHD kids, and how can they start to change that narrative around how they talk to themselves?
I think the most challenging is when you have a child who has huge emotion dysregulation, because sometimes it can feel like you can't do anything right. You just can't keep them regulated. And so I teach parents to look for patterns. Keep a record for 2 weeks of everything that's happened. Write down what happened beforehand. And even if you don't fully know what's caused it, keep a record. So keep a diary for 2 weeks. Typically what happens is you will see a pattern coming through after 2 weeks. You may recognize something that triggers your child that you weren't aware of before. So that's certainly one way to start in terms of trying to recognize what's going on.
And what's helped you shift from being self-critical to being more self-compassionate in your own parenting journey?
Probably just, for me personally, it was probably dropping expectations, recognizing that my child is doing the best he can all the time, but just sometimes he can't meet the expectations of society or school or of myself. And recognizing that I need to meet him in the moment and be supportive and see wherever he's at, be it year 5 or, where he was struggling to get to school in the morning, or year 11 where he was struggling to pack his bag to get himself organized for school.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's whatever he needs in the moment.
Okay, so if a parent of an ADHD child is listening and is feeling totally overwhelmed, what's the one thing you want them to hear in this episode?
I want you to know that you're doing nothing wrong. You are doing the best you can, and parenting children with ADHD is incredibly stressful. I would love you to find a group or people who can understand what you're going through, because sharing this is so incredibly important. One of the reasons I deliver my support in a group coaching format is because when parents meet other parents who are going through the same path, I can literally see them going, oh, thank goodness somebody else understands. You watch a room full of parents who are all going through it, and one is telling a story and all the others are nodding. I just love those moments.
It's that common humanity, isn't it?
Because you can feel so isolated. You can feel I'm the only one who's finding this bad. So I'm clearly a terrible parent, which is the most awful feeling. And sadly, the problem is neurotypical parenting doesn't work for ADHD children a lot of the time.
Yep.
So what I teach them is how to tweak it. How to actually tweak those skills so you can actually lean into your own strengths and follow your own beliefs and values and support your child where they need to be.
Yeah, that's really nice. Hopefully that is helping some people that are listening today. What's a gentle first step that parents can take to start building more awareness of their emotions without feeling like it's one more thing on their plate?
I would honestly say the first step is even awareness that you're dysregulated. And that was certainly my first step of even recognizing that I actually am starting to get agitated. I'm a tummy person. I get butterflies in my tummy.
Yeah.
And so now I know to look for those, but I actually had to teach myself to look for those at the beginning. So the first starting point is trying to figure out what is your sign and trying to take note of the times when you're actually dysregulated. And then after that, it's if you can add on 3 deep breaths
on top of that. So final question. We've spoken, you and I, about advocating for our kids that have ADHD. Do you have any advice to give to parents if they're needing to advocate for their kids in a school setting or a community setting?
Nina, we could have a whole new podcast about this.
We'll book you in for another episode.
And maybe we should.
Maybe we should.
Because honestly, it can be a really challenging role for parents to play, but it's really dependent on the individual school and the individual teacher you're dealing with. There are amazing teachers out there, but there are also many teachers who don't understand ADHD. And if you don't understand ADHD and you think the child is deliberately not listening or deliberately not trying, you're going to approach it very differently to it's his brain or it's her brain, and this is the reason she's acting the way she is. So the first step, honestly, is if you meet with the teacher, hopefully you can have a face-to-face and try and go in with a problem-solving approach, a collaborative approach. Look, what are you struggling with most with my child at the moment? Because sometimes your child is hard work to teach. So by going in with that approach and saying, look, let's see if we can find something that works together. Most teachers are really, really open to that and very, very, very grateful if you can actually offer something that will actually work in the classroom.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Susan. That brings us to the end of our chat today. Before we close, where can people find you, or would you like to say a bit more about one of your programs?
Sure. Well, my website is susanhughes.com.au, and I run a program. I run it by term, so you can access either as part of a group, or you can access privately as well if the group setting doesn't work for you. If, for example, if you're a couple and you decide you want more one-on-one supportive. So basically what I'd say, go on my website and have a look.
Fantastic. And you're on all the socials as well?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to our podcast today. I really hope you've got some good advice and some tips if you are a parent of an ADHD child. And even if you're not, you've got a better understanding of what some other parents are experiencing and that their journey is slightly different to yours. So we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you and enjoy your calm parenting path.
Thanks for listening to Your Calm Parenting Path. I am so glad you're here. And I hope this episode gave you something useful to take into your parenting journey. If you'd like to dive deeper, sign up to my mailing list at mindfulparentinglifestyle.com.au for more tips and insights, or book a free chat to learn how we can work together. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. I look forward to speaking with you next time on Your Calm Parenting Path.